My beloved friends, let us begin by pondering a truth that should stir our hearts to awe and reverence. We are not our own, for we have been bought with a price, the precious blood of Jesus Christ, 1 Corinthians 6:20. Thus, our lives are not to be squandered or exposed recklessly. The very name we bear, chosen ones, declares our sanctity. We are a royal priesthood, a peculiar people, called to proclaim the praises of him who brought us out of darkness into marvelous light. 1 Peter 2:9. Yet in this high calling, a solemn duty rests upon our shoulders, the sacredness of discretion. As Christ himself warned in Matthew 7:6, "Do not give what is holy to the dogs, nor cast your pearls before swine." Here lies a divine charge. Not every treasure is to be paraded before the eyes of those who cannot perceive its worth. Why is this so? Consider the weight of the pearls you carry. Within you lie testimonies of grace, revelations of truth, and the workings of a spirit that abides. These are sacred things, not trinkets for the marketplace of human opinion. Some will mock, others will misuse, and many will misunderstand. Wisdom, therefore, demands discernment. Charles Spurgeon once said, "Discernment is not knowing the difference between right and wrong. It is knowing the difference between right and almost right." The same principle applies to how and when we unveil the riches entrusted to us. Today, we shall consider 7 treasures, 7 aspects of your life and faith that must be guarded with vigilance. For to reveal these prematurely or carelessly is to risk their desecration. Let us therefore tread carefully as we explore these truths, allowing the Spirit to search our hearts and grant us wisdom to protect what is holy. For we live in an age where oversharing has become commonplace, where the sacred is often trampled underfoot by those who neither understand nor value its worth. Let us not be of that number. As we proceed, remember that our journey today is not simply an intellectual exercise, but a call to spiritual maturity. In guarding these treasures, you will not only protect yourself, but glorify the one who chose you before the foundation of the world. Let us now delve into the first treasure that must be guarded, your salvation story. It is one of the most precious gifts you have received, a testimony to the unfathomable grace of God and the transformative power of His Spirit. Revelation 12, verse 11, declares, "And they overcame him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony." Yes, your testimony is a weapon against the enemy, a beacon of hope to others, and a celebration of God's faithfulness. But hear me well, not every detail of your story is meant for every ear. In his ministry, Charles Spurgeon emphasized the importance of contextual witness. He warned against the danger of casting sacred pearls before those who scoff. "The gospel is a casket of jewels," Spurgeon once said, "and it must not be exposed to the mockery of swine." While sharing your testimony can lead others to Christ, it requires discernment about what, when, and to whom it is shared. Consider the Apostle Paul's example in Acts 22. Before a hostile audience in Jerusalem, Paul shared his conversion story, but carefully selected details to connect with his listeners. He emphasized his Jewish heritage, his zealous persecution of the church, and the divine encounter on the road to Damascus. He refrained from elaborating on matters that would alienate his audience prematurely. Why should we be careful in sharing our salvation story? 1. Not everyone will celebrate your redemption. Some will mock your testimony, treating it as foolishness. This is the tragic reality of 1 Corinthians 1:18. For the message of the cross is foolishness to those who are perishing. By sharing your story indiscriminately, you risk exposing sacred experiences to ridicule. 2. Details can be misunderstood or weaponized. In our confessions, we may inadvertently provide ammunition to critics or doubters. Spurgeon warned against gratuitous openness, where sharing too freely becomes a stumbling block. "It is one thing to declare what God has done," he wrote, "but another to glory in the sins from which we were saved." Guard against spiritual pride. There is a fine line between glorifying God and drawing attention to oneself. Boasting in the flesh, even under the guise of testimony, can dilute the power of your story. Let him who glories glory in the Lord. 2 Corinthians 10:17. Let me illustrate with a story from our present day. A young woman, recently saved from a life of addiction, boldly shared her testimony on social media. At first, her story inspired many, but soon the backlash came. Critics dissected her past, mocked her faith, and cast doubt on her sincerity. Her zeal was genuine, but her lack of discernment left her vulnerable to attacks that could have been avoided. Dear friends, the testimony of your salvation is a pearl of great price. Share it wisely, led by the Spirit. Speak to those who are ready to listen, whose hearts God has prepared. Remember that the ultimate purpose of your testimony is to glorify God and draw others to Him, not to gratify a momentary impulse to speak. Spurgeon's advice rings true. Testimonies must be like arrows, aimed at the heart. They are not meant to be fireworks let off to amuse the crowd. Go forth then as wise stewards of your story, knowing when to share and when to keep sacred what the Lord has done. Next, let us examine another treasure that must be guarded closely, your private battles. These are the hidden struggles of your heart, the conflicts that rage in the secret chambers of your soul, often unseen by the world but deeply felt by you and God. Psalm 91:1 teaches us, "He who dwells in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty." The secret place is where your deepest battles belong, not in the spotlight of public opinion or the prying gaze of those who may misunderstand. Why is this so important? 1. Your battles are not for public consumption. Spurgeon warned against the temptation to expose one's private struggles in search of sympathy or validation. He once said, "Some people wear their troubles as if they were medals to be admired, but God would have us bring our cares to Him and leave them at His feet." Sharing too openly can turn sacred struggles into spectacles for gossip, criticism, or exploitation. Think of Job's friends. When Job faced unimaginable trials, they became armchair theologians, misjudging his suffering and offering flawed counsel, Job 16:2. Publicizing your battles can invite unhelpful opinions from those unqualified to bear or understand your burden. 2. Your struggles may be misconstrued. Spurgeon cautioned, "Do not expect the world to see as you see or feel as you feel. They are blind to spiritual things." When you lay bare your struggles before those who lack spiritual discernment, you risk their trivialization or distortion. Consider Joseph in Genesis 37. When he shared his dreams with his brothers, they mocked him and conspired against him. Not every battle, vision, or revelation is for every ear. Number 3, the enemy listens too. Spiritual battles are not just private matters. They are part of a larger war against powers of darkness. Ephesians 6:12 reminds us, "For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this age." Broadcasting your struggles can give the enemy a foothold, making you vulnerable to further attacks. To understand this principle, consider David's example in Psalm 142. While hiding in a cave from Saul, David poured out his soul to the Lord, not to others. "I cry out to the Lord with my voice," he declared. "I pour out my complaint before Him. I declare before Him my trouble." Psalm 142, 1-2. David recognized that only God could truly understand and intervene in his plight. A modern parallel comes to mind. A young man struggling with anxiety posted his deepest fears on a public forum, hoping for encouragement. Instead, he received judgment and unkind remarks that deepened his pain. His vulnerability was not met with compassion, but with insensitivity, proving the danger of casting sacred struggles before an unholy audience. 4. Your battles are part of your testimony in progress. As Spurgeon wisely noted, your trial today is your testimony tomorrow, but let the work of God be complete before you unveil it to the world. God is shaping you in your struggles, refining your faith and character. Prematurely sharing them can disrupt this sacred process. Does this mean you must suffer in silence? Certainly not. The Bible teaches the value of godly counsel and the support of trusted believers. Galatians 6:2 exhorts us to bear one another's burdens and so fulfill the law of Christ. But notice the emphasis, bear one another's burdens, not everyone's. Choose your confidants wisely, seeking those who are spiritually mature and capable of providing godly guidance. Beloved, your private battles are sacred ground where God meets you. Trust Him to carry you through, and share your burdens only with those who will handle them with the reverence they deserve. In the words of Spurgeon, Trust God in the dark till the light returns. Tell him all your secrets, but be wary of proclaiming them before men. The third treasure that must be guarded with discernment is your financial status. Whether you are experiencing abundance or struggling to make ends meet, this area of life is often a battleground of pride, insecurity, and envy. The scriptures are clear about the need for wisdom and prudence in this matter. Proverbs 13:16 states, "Every prudent man acts with knowledge, but a fool lays open his folly." Sharing too openly about your financial circumstances, be it wealth or poverty, can lead to pitfalls that harm both your spiritual walk and your relationships. Why is financial discretion so critical? 1. Wealth can invite envy and exploitation. If the Lord has blessed you with material abundance, rejoice and give thanks. But beware of flaunting your riches. As Ecclesiastes 5:11 warns, when goods increase, they increase who eat them. Publicizing your prosperity can attract those who seek to exploit your resources for their own gain, or worse, lead others to stumble in envy. Charles Spurgeon observed, "Riches are but a fleeting shadow. To boast in them is to trust the wind." Those who parade their wealth risk not only the bitterness of others, but also their own pride. Remember the rich man in Luke 12:16-21, who hoarded his wealth, boasting of his future ease, only to face God's judgment that very night. 2. Poverty can invite judgment or pity. On the other hand, broadcasting your financial struggles can lead to judgment or patronizing pity. It may even become a stumbling block to your faith. Paul exhorted believers to learn contentment in all circumstances, whether in plenty or want. "I have learned in whatever state I am to be content." Philippians 4:11. Spurgeon echoed this truth when he said, "Let not your poverty tempt you to envy, nor your wealth to pride. Both are fleeting, but godliness with contentment is great gain." When we focus too much on what we lack, we lose sight of the sufficiency of Christ, who supplies all our needs according to his riches in glory. Philippians 4:19. 3. Your financial status is not your identity. In a culture that often equates worth with wealth, Christians must resist this falsehood. Your value is found not in your bank account, but in your standing as a child of God. Romans 8:17 declares that we are heirs of God and joint heirs with Christ, a wealth far surpassing any earthly treasure. Spurgeon beautifully expressed this when he wrote, "I may be poor in pocket, but I am rich in Christ, and that is enough." 4. Financial sharing can distort relationships. Whether you are wealthy or struggling, financial disclosures can complicate relationships. It may breed resentment among peers, create a sense of superiority or inferiority, or even burden others with an obligation to help. Jesus himself warned against the pursuit of materialism, saying, "Take heed and beware of covetousness, for one's life does not consist in the abundance of the things he possesses." Luke 12:15. Consider a biblical example. King Hezekiah in 2 Kings 20 verse 12-19. When Babylonian envoys visited, Hezekiah foolishly displayed all his treasures, exposing the riches of his kingdom. This act of prideful transparency led to a prophecy of judgment, as the Babylonians would later plunder Judah's wealth. His failure to guard his financial secrets had dire consequences. In modern times, we see similar risks. Social media is replete with examples of individuals flaunting their wealth, only to face robbery, fraud, or public backlash. Others, seeking validation, air their financial struggles online, exposing themselves to ridicule or unhelpful advice. Beloved, heed the wisdom of Proverbs 30:8-9. "Give me neither poverty nor riches. Feed me with the food allotted to me, lest I be full and deny you and say, 'Who is the Lord?' Or lest I be poor and steal and profane the name of my God." Let your financial status be a matter between you and the Lord, shared only with those who need to know. Spurgeon once remarked, "A man's treasure is safest where thieves cannot break in and steal. Lay yours in heaven, and let the earth see but little of it." Guard your financial life with humility, gratitude, and discretion, trusting God to be your ultimate provider. The fourth treasure requiring vigilance is your deepest fears and insecurities. These are the vulnerabilities of the soul, the tender places where doubt and struggle reside. While it is human to have fears, the way we handle them speaks volumes about our faith and wisdom. Proverbs 4:23 exhorts us, "Keep your heart with all diligence, for out of it spring the issues of life." Your heart, its fears, wounds, and uncertainties, is a sacred trust. To share these indiscriminately is to risk them being misunderstood, exploited, or mishandled. Why must you guard your fears and insecurities? 1. Not everyone will handle them with care. The world can be a harsh place, often unsympathetic to vulnerability. Spurgeon warned against seeking comfort from broken cisterns, referring to the habit of turning to people or places incapable of providing true solace. When you share your fears with those who lack spiritual wisdom, you may find yourself met with mockery, dismissal, or unhelpful advice. Consider the spies sent into Canaan in Numbers 13. 10 of them returned full of fear, declaring, We are like grasshoppers in our own sight." Numbers 13:33. Their fear spread like wildfire among the Israelites, leading to rebellion and despair. This account reminds us that exposing fears to the wrong audience can have devastating ripple effects. 2. Your fears may empower the enemy. The enemy delights in exploiting our insecurities to weaken our faith. Ephesians 6:16 speaks of the fiery darts of the wicked one, and these often aim for our most vulnerable areas. Spurgeon once said, "Doubt is a dagger aimed at the very heart of faith. Do not let it be sharpened by careless words or rash confidences." When we expose our fears recklessly, we may unintentionally fuel the enemy's attacks. 3. Your fears are meant to drive you to God. Psalm 34:4 offers a profound promise. "I sought the Lord, and he heard me and delivered me from all my fears." Your fears and insecurities are not meant to be paraded before others. They are an invitation to draw nearer to God. Spurgeon beautifully captured this truth, saying, "When fear knocks at your door, send faith to answer it, and you will find no one there." To illustrate, consider Hannah's prayer in 1 Samuel 1. Burdened by barrenness, she poured out her soul to the Lord, not to others. Her vulnerability before God resulted in a blessing, as he granted her the desire of her heart. Imagine how different her story might have been if she had sought human validation instead of divine intervention. 4. Sharing too freely can hinder growth. Your fears and insecurities are often the very tools God uses to refine you. Spurgeon compared this process to gold being tested in the fire, saying, "It is not the fear that destroys us, but the refusal to take it to the refiner's hands." Prematurely sharing these struggles can interrupt the sacred work God is doing within you, turning a moment of transformation into a point of stagnation. This principle has a contemporary application. Many people today share their vulnerabilities on social media, seeking affirmation from strangers. While some responses may be kind, others are cruel or dismissive, leaving the sharer more wounded than before. True healing comes not from public exposure, but from private communion with God. Let me emphasize, however, that guarding your fears does not mean burying them. James 5:16 encourages believers to confess your trespasses to one another and pray for one another that you may be healed. Seek trusted, spiritually mature confidants, those who will point you back to God and intercede on your behalf. Beloved, your deepest fears are not a sign of weakness, but an opportunity to trust in the Lord's strength. Psalm 56:3 reminds us, "Whenever I am afraid, I will trust in you." Handle your fears with care, bringing them to the throne of grace rather than the court of public opinion. In the words of Spurgeon, faith can outlive fear, but only when it is fed by the word and not by the whims of men. Your family's secrets. Every household has its own joys, struggles, and complexities. These private matters are entrusted to you not to broadcast, but to safeguard with integrity and wisdom. Proverbs 11:13 declares, "A talebearer reveals secrets, but he who is of a faithful spirit conceals a matter." Faithfulness to your family includes guarding the sanctity of its inner life, ensuring that its honor and dignity remain intact. Why must you protect your family's secrets? 1. To preserve trust and unity. Within families, trust is the foundation of healthy relationships. When you expose private matters to outsiders, you risk betraying that trust and creating division. Spurgeon wisely observed, "A house divided against itself will not stand, but often it is divided by a whisper before the enemy has even fired a shot." Your discretion can be the glue that holds your family together during times of trial. Consider the example of Noah in Genesis 9:20-23. After the flood, Noah became drunk and lay uncovered in his tent. His son Ham saw his father's shame and reported it to others, while Shem and Japheth covered their father without looking. The blessing fell upon Shem and Japheth, while Ham faced judgment. This story underscores the importance of protecting family dignity. 2. To shield your family from unnecessary scrutiny. In an age of oversharing, the temptation to publicize private family matters, whether out of frustration, pride, or a desire for sympathy, is great. Yet doing so can invite harmful scrutiny or judgment. As Spurgeon noted, the world is swift to judge and slow to understand. Guard your household from the scorn of the unkind. Imagine a parent who vents their child's struggles to co-workers or friends. While their intent may be harmless, such disclosures can damage the child's reputation, self-esteem, or sense of safety. Protecting your family's secrets ensures they are not subjected to the court of public opinion. 3. To allow God to work in private. Families, like individuals, are works in progress. Sharing unresolved issues prematurely can disrupt the sanctifying work God is doing. Ecclesiastes 3:7 reminds us, a time to keep silence and a time to speak. There is wisdom in waiting for God's timing before disclosing what he is working to heal or restore. Spurgeon likened this to a garden, saying, "Do not pull back the curtain before the flower has bloomed, for its fragrance is best when its time has come." Your family's struggles may one day be a testimony to God's faithfulness, but for now, they are part of a sacred process requiring patience and discretion. 4. To avoid sowing seeds of dishonor. Gossip and careless words can tear down a family's reputation, even unintentionally. James 3:5 warns, "Even so the tongue is a little member and boasts great things. See how great a forest a little fire kindles." Spurgeon once said, "Let your words be few and your prayers many. The former can destroy, but the latter builds." When you expose family secrets, you risk starting fires that are difficult to extinguish. Let me share a modern parallel. A woman, frustrated with her husband's shortcomings, vented her grievances online. Though her intention was to seek advice, her words spread far and wide, damaging her husband's reputation and creating tension in their marriage. What could have been resolved privately became a public spectacle, complicating their path to reconciliation. Does this mean you should never seek counsel or support for family struggles? Of course not. Proverbs 15:22 affirms, "Without counsel, plans go awry, but in the multitude of counselors they are established." The key is to seek wise, godly counsel from trusted advisors who will uphold confidentiality and provide biblical guidance. Beloved, your family is a gift from God, even with its imperfections. Protect its honor as you would your own, remembering that love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. 1 Corinthians 13:7. In Spurgeon's words, to guard one's family is to guard the very altar of God. It is the birthplace of faith and the sanctuary of love. Be a faithful steward of your household's secrets, entrusting them to the Lord rather than to the crowd. Your personal calling or vision. God often reveals his plans for our lives in the quiet moments of prayer and communion, not for public spectacle, but for private preparation. These divine revelations are seeds that require time to grow, protected from the harsh winds of criticism or premature exposure. Habakkuk 2:3 provides wisdom for this principle. "For the vision is yet for an appointed time, but at the end it will speak, and it will not lie. Though it tarries, wait for it, because it will surely come, it will not tarry." Your calling, though sure, may not yet be ripe for sharing. Why must you shield your personal calling or vision? 1. To prevent premature exposure. Spurgeon often spoke of the necessity of divine timing, remarking, "God's promises are not slack, but they are seldom hurried. Like a pearl forming in an oyster, your calling must mature in hiddenness before it is ready to shine." Prematurely sharing your vision can lead to discouragement if others do not understand or affirm it. Think of Joseph in Genesis 37. When he shared his God-given dreams with his brothers, it provoked jealousy and hatred, ultimately leading to his enslavement. While God used this for good, Joseph's experience reminds us that not every vision is for immediate or universal proclamation. 2. To avoid discouragement. The world is filled with naysayers and doubters, often eager to dismiss what they do not understand. If you reveal your calling too soon, you risk being discouraged by the opinions of those who lack spiritual insight. As Spurgeon warned, men often scorn what they cannot fathom. Let the seedling grow strong before it faces the wind. Consider Nehemiah, who, upon receiving God's call to rebuild Jerusalem's walls, did not immediately announce his plans. Instead, he surveyed the city secretly, formulating his strategy before revealing it to the people. Nehemiah 2:11-16. His discretion ensured the vision was protected until the time was right for action. 3. To preserve the sacredness of your calling. Your calling is a holy trust, given by God for His glory and your growth. Sharing it recklessly can cheapen its significance, turning a divine commission into a topic for casual conversation. Jesus himself often commanded silence about his miracles, as in Mark 1:44, where he instructed a healed leper, "See that you say nothing to anyone." He knew that the timing and manner of revelation were crucial to fulfilling his mission. Spurgeon wrote, "Great visions are nurtured in the quiet of the soul, where God speaks and man listens. Noise and haste only diminish their grandeur." Protecting your calling allows you to honor its sacredness and ensure it remains aligned with God's purpose. 4. To allow God to refine and direct you. A vision is not a finished product, it is the beginning of a journey. Sharing it prematurely can invite unnecessary distractions or influence from others, pulling you away from God's refining work. Philippians 2:13 reminds us, "For it is God who works in you both to will and to do for his good pleasure." A contemporary illustration comes to mind. A young entrepreneur with a bold business idea shared it widely before it was fully developed. Instead of encouragement, he faced criticism and unsolicited advice that led him to doubt his own vision. Had he waited and sought God's guidance in private, his confidence and clarity might have remained intact. 5. To focus on obedience over applause. When you share your calling too soon, the temptation to seek human validation can overshadow the primary goal of obedience to God. Galatians 1:10 challenges us, "For do I now persuade men or God? Or do I seek to please men? For if I still pleased men, I would not be a bondservant of Christ." Protecting your vision ensures that your focus remains on pleasing the one who gave it, not the opinions of others. Beloved, your calling is a treasure that belongs first and foremost to the Lord. Handle it with care, sharing it only with those who will pray with you, encourage you, and point you back to God. Spurgeon beautifully expressed this principle. When God entrusts you with his vision, guard it as you would guard the Ark of the Covenant. Carry it with reverence, and let none profane it by careless hands or unworthy eyes. The 7th and final treasure to keep private is your acts of kindness and charity. In a world that often celebrates public displays of generosity, it can be tempting to broadcast your good deeds for recognition or validation. However, Scripture consistently calls us to a higher standard, one of humility, discretion, and reverence for the God who sees all. Jesus addressed this directly in Matthew 6, verse 1-4. "Take heed that you do not do your charitable deeds before men, to be seen by them. Otherwise, you have no reward from your Father in heaven. Therefore, when you do a charitable deed, do not sound a trumpet before you, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and in the streets, that they may have glory from men. Assuredly, I say to you, they have their reward. But when you do a charitable deed, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, that your charitable deed may be in secret, and your Father who sees in secret will himself reward you openly." Why must acts of kindness remain private? 1. To guard against pride. Publicizing your acts of charity can subtly feed the sin of pride, turning a humble act of obedience into a spectacle of self-promotion. Spurgeon wrote, "The fragrance of a flower is lost when it is crushed by the hand of pride. So too are good deeds when paraded before men." True kindness seeks no applause, but rests content in the knowledge that God is pleased. Consider the Pharisees, whom Jesus rebuked for their ostentatious displays of piety. Their giving, fasting, and praying were all done for public approval, and Jesus declared, "They have their reward," Matthew 6:2. What a sobering reminder that earthly recognition often comes at the expense of heavenly reward. 2. To honor the dignity of the recipient. Charity is not merely about meeting material needs. It is about affirming the God-given worth of those we help. When we broadcast our acts of kindness, we risk reducing the recipient to an object of pity or a prop for our own narrative. Proverbs 19 verse 17 teaches, "He who has pity on the poor lends to the Lord, and he will pay back what he has given." Our giving is ultimately an act of worship, not an opportunity for self-promotion. Number 3, to avoid the temptation of ulterior motives. Spurgeon warned of the danger of mixing good deeds with selfish ambition, saying, "The hand that gives should not seek to receive. To do so is to profane the altar of mercy." When acts of charity are done with the hope of gaining influence, favor, or praise, they cease to be acts of love and become transactions. A biblical example of pure charity is found in the widow of Zarephath, who fed Elijah with the last of her flour and oil, 1 Kings 17, 10-16. She did so quietly, without seeking recognition or reward, and God multiplied her resources in return. Let her story inspire us to give with the same quiet trust and selflessness. 4, to ensure the glory goes to God. True charity points others to Christ, not to ourselves. Matthew 5:16 exhorts us to let your light so shine before men that they may see your good works and glorify your Father in heaven. The key is that the glory must go to God, not to us. Spurgeon beautifully summarized this principle. The Christian's hand is unseen, but the Master's glory shines bright. Let us be mirrors, not portraits, reflecting his goodness, not our own. In our modern context, social media often tempts us to publicize our acts of kindness, framing them as inspirational stories. While sharing testimonies of God's faithfulness is valuable, we must be careful to examine our motives. Are we truly glorifying God or seeking validation from others? 5, to receive a greater reward. Jesus promised that acts of kindness done in secret will be rewarded openly by the Father. Spurgeon encouraged believers to trust in this promise, saying, "The secret alms given in love will bloom as unseen seeds, bearing fruit in eternity." When we give quietly and selflessly, we participate in the economy of heaven, where treasures are eternal and incorruptible. Matthew 6:19-20. Beloved, let your acts of kindness be like a hidden stream, nourishing the land without demanding recognition. As you serve others, remember that your ultimate audience is the Lord, who sees and honors every deed done in his name. In the words of Spurgeon, to give in secret is to place the crown upon Christ's head, where it belongs, and to rest in the joy that he sees and knows. May these 7 treasures, your plans, dreams, finances, fears, family secrets, calling, and acts of charity, be guarded with wisdom and entrusted to the Lord. For in protecting these sacred matters, you preserve the integrity of your walk with God and the beauty of his work in your life. Amen.